This episode of the Real ResQ podcast is brought to you by SR3 Rescue Concepts, because you don't know what you don't know. Life-Saving Systems Corporation, we do our work so you can do yours. Tough gear for tough jobs. Breeze Eastern, the world's only dedicated hoist and winch provider. And Hilo Vodka, simply better vodka. SR3 Rescue Concepts is a training company that can help you with your helicopter training, a standardization and safety check, or maybe just an audit or an FAA refresher. They're ready to bring your agency up to date with current techniques, rules, regulations, and equipment. The training staff is amazing, with certified and flight instructor pilots, experienced crew members, which I'm happy to say that I get to be one of them. They offer training in rescue, medical, tactical, firefighting, ground operations, and night vision goggle use. SR3 has partnered with Petzl to assist with the PPE inspection course and the highly specific Lazard, which is used in helicopter cliff and mountain rescues. SR3 goes above and beyond the helicopter world too. They also provide high-angle rescue training and tactical medicine training. Contact them today at sr3rescueconcepts.com. That's sr3rescueconcepts.com. And follow them on Instagram at sr3_rescue. That's sr3_rescue. We're also brought to you by Life-Saving System Corporation. They manufacture the world's toughest helicopter rescue gear. From my favorite harness as a rescueman, the Triton, to the rescue baskets and litters, and of course the most popular hoist hook in helicopters, the D-Lock. The team at LSC cuts, bends, welds, sews, and machines these products into existence every day and then sends them on their way to us. We do our work so you can do yours. LSC, tough gear for tough jobs. Check them out today at lifesavingsystems.com. That's lifesavingsystems.com. And follow them on Instagram at ResQGEAR. That's at ResQGEAR. We're also brought to you by Breeze Eastern. Since the very first helicopter rescue in November 1945, Breeze Eastern has designed and manufactured superior rescue hoist solutions. While much of the technology and unique mission requirements have changed over the past 75 years, their commitment to the rescuers, the operators, and those who get rescued has not. Contact Breeze Eastern today by visiting them at breeze-eastern.com. That's breeze-eastern.com. And we are brought to you by Hilo Vodka. Hilo Vodka is a premium craft vodka, made from the highest quality ingredients and 6 times distilled. Hilo Vodka was made to be crisp, refreshing, and unintrusive. It's exactly how vodka should be made, clean enough to drink neat and worthy to be mixed with your favorite cocktails. They make a crisp, refreshing vodka that is carefully carbon filtered for a smooth sip and no bite. Hilo Vodka is 100% American made. It is proudly veteran owned by a former search and rescue pilot. Simply better vodka. Order yours today by visiting shophilovodka.com. That's shophilovodka.com. FedEx delivery is available in most states. Use the promo code capitals RESQ and you get 10% off your order. Plus, if you buy 3 bottles or more, it's free shipping. Please remember to drink responsibly, and FAA Part 91 says 8 hours, bottle the throttle. Our next guest is a super close personal friend of mine. The guy is absolutely amazing. He's an amazing pilot, an amazing leader. I've been able to take such great advice from him, even by watching him work and what he does and what he brings to the table. It's just awesome, and I love every bit of it. I have brought it to my own work, try to mimic a lot of the things that he would do, and it's just good advice. When him and I were working together in the Gulf of Mexico, it just so happened that Vertical Magazine came down and did a full article on everything that all of our crews were doing down there in the Gulf. So that was kind of a fun thing with him and I and the rest of the crews down there, because we did like photo shoots, and Dan Magna, shout out to that guy. We had just a great relationship, and it was so fun to do that whole thing. So without further ado, one of my best friends in this industry, Mr. Eugene Reynolds. My name is Jason Quinn. I am United States Coast Guard Rescue Swimmer number 500. These are my rescues and rescues from those of us that put our lives on the line every day so others may live. This is the Real ResQ podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Real ResQ podcast. Today, yes, my friend, my brother, a killer pilot, somebody that I've learned a lot in life from, and whether he likes to admit it or not, I really have, Mr. Gene Reynolds. What's up, Gene?
Jason, good to see you, buddy. It's nice to be here, man.
Dude, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. So we have a lot to talk about, and this is going to be, I'm totally stoked about this. But to give everybody a little bit of a background, you and I met down in the Gulf of Mexico. We were working in Louisiana and Texas together. We had little patches made that said, foo, no, something about foo. SAR 1, foo, the foo.
No, we had SAR 1, Club Foo.
Club foo, yeah.
And then the other base was in Galveston, so we had SAR 2, not foo. I still have those patches.
Oh, so do I. Love it. That's awesome. So Gene, for everybody else that doesn't know you, please introduce yourself.
All right. Thanks, Jason. My name is Gene Reynolds. Let's see. I'm a mediocre individual. Well, if you want me to go all the way back, or give me
whatever you want, my friend. This podcast is yours.
Yeah, man. So currently I'm working as assistant chief pilot for Life Flight Network here in the Pacific Northwest. I manage 4 single pilot IFR bases for Air Ambulance Company. And I manage the pilots and the aircraft at those locations. My aviation history goes pretty far back, a little over 2 decades. And like Jason said, we met probably 2011 in the Gulf of Mexico. And so that's kind of how we met. And I'm sure that we'll get into
a little bit of that.
Some of that over the next few minutes. So
I won't throw you under the bus too bad if you don't throw me under the bus too bad, please.
Fair.
We had some good.
Do not talk about New Orleans.
I don't know what you're talking about. I did not. No, and nothing happened in Houston either.
Oh, it's a good time.
My wife is standing right here. She's like, "What are you guys talking about?" Nothing, honey.
That's awesome. Hi, Mel.
Gene says hello. Hi, Gene. Oh, that's funny. All right, so thank you for giving me a little bit of background. So what brought you into search and rescue? Let me start with that.
So good question. And I've been thinking about that a little bit. So my flying career started well before I joined the Army, and I knew I wanted to fly. It has nothing to do with search and rescue, but I started flying back in the late 90s, and then I joined the Army, and I flew helicopters for the Army. Well, most of the world or the industry knows that the Army doesn't do search and rescue, right. If you will. They aren't really in that role. However, they do some of that. Okay. But only in a unique situation. Well, my Army career took me through a lot of different paths and opportunities. And I had the opportunity to work with the Army Special Operations Aviation Regiment. And I did that for nearly a decade. And I would say that was my first exposure to real search and rescue. We didn't do traditional search and rescue like the Coast Guard per se, or other traditional search and rescue units. But we did do some similar work to include hostage rescue and very important operations that involved similar search and rescue techniques. My first few years in the Army, I was with what some might call regular Army, the Green Army. And we didn't really do, it wasn't in our task list. We weren't trained on search and rescue or anything. But when I went to special operations, it was definitely an idea that we kind of carried around with us. And we knew that we were pretty much trained and capable of doing whatever type of operation with a helicopter that the customer might ask for. And that included some search and rescue, or that included some special rescue, if you will. Yep. Not a whole lot of search because, fortunately, at that level, there's not a whole lot of searching going on because everyone knows where all the players might be.
Which is good and bad, depending on how you're going into it. So,
however, probably my introduction to search and rescue was an event that, or a series of events that happened in Afghanistan. And I won't discredit the word search because we kind of flew around the countryside and looked for a particular individual that we didn't exactly know where they were. Yep. And we were flying a particular customer that was, let me back up. We were probably the premier aviation force in Afghanistan at the time. So we were not only working for U.S. military, but we were working for other military as well, to include Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom. And so not because their aviation assets weren't capable, but maybe because they didn't either have enough, or they weren't on site, or they, whatever the case may be. But in this case, we were employed by a customer that was not the U.S. And they said, hey, we need some help finding and recovering a particular individual. And so, of course, we were there ready to go. So the information that we had sent us on some particular flights. And one night we went with our customer on board the aircraft looking for this particular individual. And we weren't so lucky. And so we kind of regrouped and kind of went back into our planning phase and said, hey, what's going on? Why can't we find this individual? And some new information came out. I said, oh, okay, now we're certain that, this person is located here. And I remember being a part of that team, and I'm like, this is pretty special because not only have we been specifically requested by a different country to fly their special operators, their tip of the spear, if you would. And so we knew that we were onto something pretty significant. And they said, hey, here's where we want to go. Here's what we want to do, but we have to get permission to do it first. And I remember being in a room with some key people, and some of our leadership was on the phone with some pretty key leadership from another country, like red phone to red phone kind of stuff. I'm just throwing that out there. But
pick up the bat phone. Have the bat phone call a Robin phone.
Hey, we need permission to execute this operation. And it was pretty significant because I remember standing there like, wow, this is pretty cool. I'm standing next to a guy who's on the phone with one of the top leaders of a pretty important country in the US or in the world. And I was like, wow, this is pretty significant. And I've got a pretty big responsibility as the aircraft commander for my particular helicopter. And so once we got approval to do that, the phone gets slammed down like a typical phone would get slammed down. And they said, where to go? And so we kind of moved to the helicopters, and we all had we literally wrote out our plan on a napkin. The flight lead said, this is where we're going. This is where you're going. He told me, this is where you're landing. And this is what you're doing. And so we went to the aircraft, we left, we departed, we flew to the location. And it was quite an exciting night. I don't know if they were celebrating their country's independence, but there was a lot of fireworks in the sky.
Those
And
fireworks might have been like going by you at this,
yeah,
and
so
you're like,
that.
what the?
There
Oh
was a
my
lot of that
gosh.
going on. And we did our job. We kind of landed and insert, the helicopter is not really the tip of the spear, but we carry the customer that really is.
Yep.
And so we landed, we inserted them, and they did their job. And at the end
All
of
while fireworks are going off all
oh
around
man,
you.
yeah, it was quite exciting. And then we came right back in, and they had the individual they were looking for, and we picked them up, and we flew out of there, still, with the independence celebration going on. And it was really quite exciting. And probably one of the things I remember about that night was we have all these kind of like checklists, and we have this equipment on our aircraft, and we have forward-looking infrared, and we have all these cameras and things, and we were able to record that kind of stuff on tape. And part of our checklist is to set the recorder to record while we're inbound to the scene, right? And so I followed the checklist because I'm a good pilot and I follow my checklist. And I turn my recorder on, and then we fly through the whole thing, and it gets exciting. And then at the end, afterwards, we do a post action checklist, and I turn my recorder off, and we land at the end of the night, and everyone's high-fiving, and oh, great job, everyone, good job, pats on the back here and there. And I said, well, did anyone else record it? And everyone else forgot to turn their recorders on. I was the only one who turned on the VCR, or the recorder for the camera. So my tape got confiscated pretty quickly, and taken for debriefing and evaluation and all that kind of stuff. And I wish to this day that I still had a copy of that tape, because it was pretty. I thought it was pretty epic, but so no, I don't have a copy of that, unfortunately, but I was the only one to record and to kind of document for posterity some of the events of that night.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So that was my first real, the rescue part of search and rescue. We didn't really have to search much, but the rescue was quite exciting. Yeah.
So one of the things that I remember from this story is while the fireworks were going on around you, you were so excited, you were giving fireworks back. Like, hey.
Dude, so I give a lot of credit, right? And I'm going to talk about this later in our episode here, but the entire crew is critical to the success of the operation. There's not one single person on the aircraft, or even on the ground for that matter, that is not significant or critical to the success of the operation. And we had guns on the aircraft that were manned by really skilled operators. And we decided to throw some fireworks of our own, and we had to. And I remember after we did the first infiltrate, like when we first landed, we offloaded our door kickers, as you might call them. And our guns were just going, and they're doing their thing, and they're shooting and shooting. And we take off, and we're kind of like just had departed. And my gunners tell me, they're like, oh my gosh, sir, hey, we're Winchester right now. Like, they literally just unloaded like a number of rounds with a comma in it. And I was like, what? Well, right about that time, we got called back for an emergency exfil. Our particular helicopter had the emergency medical team on board. So if anyone got injured during the operation, we were the particular ones that needed to go back in and help. And so we immediately got called saying, hey, someone's been injured. We need you to come back in. So we literally almost did a U-turn and went right back to the objective. But my crew member said, hey, we need to reload. We have just expended all of our ammo. So they're in the process of reloading. And I'm like, well, okay, well, so now we've got to make sure we reload and before we can go back in. And that was that was pretty exciting, because when they told me they were out of ammo, I'm like, wait a minute, I saw how much ammo you guys loaded onto the aircraft. And so for you guys to tell me that you're out of ammo right now is, I can't believe you just threw that much lead down range. And so that was pretty interesting experience for sure.
Jeez, God, you know what? Hearing that story again, just I love it. That
Yeah.
Well done. Yeah, and I agree with you. Like the whole crew, it does take an entire crew to get that done.
I'm just a driver, man. I'm telling you, I'm just a driver.
Shooting fireworks out the little window. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I love it. Oh man. All right. Well, and with your trip to Afghanistan, you actually did. You know what? If you don't even have to throw this bone to you, because I'm going to do it. But you got a couple, at least one distinguished flying cross out of that. 5 air medals that I know of. Gene, I mean, you came out of there with some missions that were like, wow. So enough to get, and like, I don't want to put like, oh, you did an award and you got an award for a case, but for guys to be put in for an award, there was something significant behind that in particular mission, flight, whatever. And
it's funny you mentioned that, and I appreciate that. And I will tell you that I did have I had the honor of serving with some pretty impressive people. I'm not sure how I slipped through the cracks to make it to that location or that job, but I did, and I was able to serve with some really impressive people, and really just served in the company of heroes for that matter. Yeah, I know why I got my awards, and I know why I was nominated for them, and that's cool. Helps me sleep well at night. It's no big deal. Yeah. But one mission in particular, we were working for a particular country, and we were flying their special operators. And at the end of that operation, everyone again was patting each other on the back, going, great job, you guys are awesome. And even this country, their customer was like, man, you guys are the best, you guys are awesome, we'll hire you any day. And so the awards conversation started floating around, and I said, I don't really want an award. You know what I want to be knighted. I want to be knighted by the Queen. And if you guys can make that happen, that would be really cool. Because I mean, like, if Elton John can write a song and get knighted,
exactly.
Or if if somebody can summit Mount Everest and get knighted, I'm like, I think like what we did just recently, maybe that constitutes a knighting, but it didn't happen. It really didn't, and nobody laughed, and everyone's like, nope, I don't think that's going to happen. So here's your stinking award. And so that was that.
You know what? That's awesome. The fact that even to bring that up, I can I get knighted? I mean, it was.
Yeah, I thought, I'm like, if I could just add sir to my name, or esquire, whatever. I don't know. I don't even know what like title you get when you get knighted, but I was like, maybe if I could just be called sir for the rest of my life without actually having a job where people have to call me sir. It's like, maybe I could put that in my signature block.
You and I have spent so much time together. That makes it even funnier for me with everything. So side story is that Gene and I were together and we're kicking back a couple brews, and next thing I know, he's telling somebody down at the end of the bar that I swim with Michael Phelps and I'm his sparring swimmer, and I'm like, what? And all you do is just lean over and be like, go with it.
I remember that. That was amazing. That was so much, man.
We went back like 4 weeks later, and they're like, hey, you're the guy that swims with Michael Phelps. And I'm like, oh, God, no, I'm not. But all right. Michael Phelps, that's all you do.
I set you up for success, man. That was epic.
Oh, my gosh. So, yeah.
I was like, Michael Phelps needs like a sparring partner. He needs someone to train with. And this guy, he doesn't like get to stand on the medal stand. He doesn't go to the Olympics, but this is Michael Phelps' sparring partner. And they ate that up.
Totally did. So it was we were so full of shit. It was Hilarious. So now to backtrack to that story, the fact that you were asking for a knighting, not surprising to me. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great, man.
Freaking beautiful. Oh my gosh. All right. So let me, unless you want to touch on anything else that you did in the Army, I'm happy to move forward to where you and I kind of met and started
Yeah,
working
man,
together.
absolutely, absolutely. The Army was, meh. The details of my Army life are inconsequential.
Hey, it got you here. It got you to where you're at. So
Absolutely, it's a journey. It's a journey.
It is indeed. And like I look at it like the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard was my foundation.
Yep.
I didn't end with the Coast Guard. I'm still doing the job. I mean, you're still flying. It's just that it's a great foundation to where we get started to build the opportunities that got presented in front of us. And it's been an amazing ride. So I've loved every bit of it. But
so let's talk about where we got to the point where we met.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So let me throw in a quick little anecdotal SAR story, if you will.
Yes.
When I separated from the Army, I took about 10 months off before I went back to work. And I lived aboard a sailboat in Washington State. And I ended up taking that sailboat offshore and sailing it down to Central America. And I'd never been, on the ground portion, if you will, of a search and rescue event. But anyway, we were about 100 miles offshore the coast of Northern California, and it was nighttime and the weather was not very pleasant. And I've got the radar and radio going, and I'm just doing my thing, trying to keep the boat upright. And I hear a mayday call come across the radio. Well, I don't actually hear the mayday call, but I hear the Coast Guard out of Humboldt Bay respond. And they responded to a mayday call. So I only hear the Coast Guard's portion of the call because they've got, high power transmitters and everything. Right. And so they're talking to some other boat that's offshore that night. And they're using words like abandoning ship and rescue and are you requesting assistance? And I'm in my own little world. I'm in my own little boat. I'm 100 miles offshore, just plowing along in big waves, and I'm getting wet, and the wind's blowing, and the sails are reefed down, and I'm kind of nervous about my own little world, but I'm doing okay. And I hear this conversation from the Coast Guard, and I'm like, man, this guy's in trouble. Like, this is not good. I'm glad that this is not me. So I'm just listening to the radio. And the Coast Guard's really doing a great job. They're talking to this guy, but I can only hear their side of the conversation, right? And apparently he gives them his location. And so they repeat the location over the radio, the lat long. So I'm like, let me just go do the, correct thing. And let me pull my chart out. Let me plot this location. And so I plot this guy's location on my chart. And sure enough, it's like 6 miles dead ahead of my course line.
Oh,
and
no way.
I'm like, wait, maybe I'm sure I did something wrong. I'm not a very good sailor. So let me replot this, And I plot this thing and I'm like, holy mackerel, this guy is, no kidding, like 6 miles dead ahead. Like, and my dead reckoning plot, like, puts us right through his location.
Okay.
And so I'm like, I kind of have an obligation to help, right? Like, it's like the rule of the sea. It's like, I'm in good health. My boat's in good shape. Who knows? Maybe I'll get to this location before the Coast Guard will, because we're 100 miles offshore. That's whatever, a 40-minute flight, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I pick my radio up. I call the Coast Guard and I, tell them who I was. And I said, hey, I'm listening to your conversation and I hear that you're talking with a mariner in distress. And I happen to be at this location and he's about 6 miles ahead of me. And they were like, oh, cool. Well, if you see him, let us know, And so I'm like, okay, so I just keep plowing along. I don't know what our speed is, maybe 6 knots, so I'm still an hour or so away from this guy.
Yeah.
But throughout the next hour, I hear them initiate a helicopter rescue. And the helicopter came out and they rescued this guy off the boat. They like the stories that you talk about in your other podcasts. They come out, they hoist this guy in the middle of the night. They pluck him off of his boat. He was a solo sailor. And the swimmer got deployed. Like, everything was really, I didn't know much about that work, but I'm listening to it on the radio and it was really fantastic. And they get him off his boat and they leave, and that's cool. I'm like, great, this dude's got rescued. But then I'm thinking, I'm like, wait a minute, they left his boat just floating out here in the ocean.
Uh-huh.
And it's dark. I don't want to hit this thing, right? So, I mean, it's a big ocean, little boats, but I call the Coast Guard. I was like, hey, did you guys rescue that guy? And they're like, yeah, we rescued him off the boat. It's great. I said, cool. Did you guys scuttle the boat? No. I said, did you leave any lights on? No. I was like, so now there's like this floating hazard out here in the middle of the ocean that is on my course line. And they're like, yeah, sorry about that. So now for the next like half hour, I'm like diligently monitoring the radar. I'm like looking out with my binoculars. I'm like, it's the middle of the night. I'm trying to like see any light, 100 miles off the coast of Northern California. There's nothing out there, right?
No.
And so I'm like, I hope I don't just plow through this guy's sailboat right now. And so 2 or 3 hours later, we're well south of that position, so I knew it wasn't a factor, but it was enough to keep me awake and keep me on my charts and on the radio and on the I was like, oh my gosh, what a great rescue story, but I don't want to become a second victim by slamming into this guy's sailboat that they just left floating out here in the ocean. So
that actually brings up a really good point, which we don't think about very often as far as swimmers. You go in, or even rescue men in general, you go down, you're like, okay, I got you, leave. Hey, help somebody out. You ask the guy before you leave, hey, how do we turn all the lights on the boat? As long as it's not sinking, turn everything on.
Yeah, everything, right? And so it was an interesting night, but it gave me an appreciation, one, for what they do, right? I think they came out of Humboldt Bay. I think that was who we were talking to.
Probably.
And I think that's California, maybe.
Yep.
Is that Northern California? Yeah.
Correct.
And so it was really kind of cool. So it made me think and give a really new appreciation to like that. Like, you guys fly all the way out here, pull one guy off of his sailboat, and then take him back to where he's safe. Because he had lost his rudder, he had no steering, and so he was in a pretty bad way. And we were in really heavy weather, so I can only imagine him and his smaller boat with no rudder, so he was in pretty bad shape. So that was really cool. So it gave me an appreciation for that whole operation, but it definitely kept me awake for like the next hour while we were offshore.
I love it, man. That's good. I need to find out who that was now. I'm gonna start reaching out and be like, yeah, who's the guy? Yeah,
well, I mean, if afterwards I can probably figure out what date it was, because I have it in the logs, but I can send you what that SAR case probably was.
Man, that's pretty good. I like that.
And so then that leads me to where we met, right? So fast forward about 4 or 5 months, and I'm living in Mexico on my sailboat, and I'm like, I probably need to go back to work. I like flying, so I start throwing out applications like, hey, here I am, a pilot. And a company in the Gulf of Mexico hires me, and they say, hey, we want to hire you. So I go to work in the Gulf of Mexico, right? And I get on board there, and they're like, we're going to train you to fly this little tiny helicopter to fly people offshore during the daytime. I'm like, cool, man, whatever. This is awesome. And so I start flying offshore oil and gas. And about 2 weeks later, the chief pilot for the company sends me a message and says, hey, I was looking at your resume. Would you be interested in joining our search and rescue team? And I said, oh, you guys have one of those. That's kind of cool. I didn't know that commercial companies did that. And so I was introduced to the SAR program there at that particular company. And I'm like, wow, this is cool. At the time, we had you guys in the back of the aircraft, and the front of the aircraft was, I don't want to use the word immature, because they were very experienced aviators, but they weren't necessarily experienced in the work we were trying to do.
Agreed. Yep.
So I was able to contribute a little bit of experience and knowledge to that. And so we started working and training together and doing commercial offshore search and rescue in the Gulf of Mexico.
I love how you're kind of like bringing it in as like humble as you are. You came in like Captain America. Just throwing that out there, my friend.
Oh my God. No way. No way, dude. No way.
Shield in one arm.
I wasn't like that. but that's
No,
where
you
our
weren't. You
paths.
weren't. No, no, no. That's just a good little joke right there.
That's cool. That's cool.
But
I had a little bit of experience, had a lot of NVG experience, had some offshore experience, some crewed aircraft experience, and I was able to contribute a little bit of that to the success of that program to help mitigate the risk and then kind of build that program to what it became. And that's where we crossed paths. And we first met, and you might ask me, oh, do you remember your first SAR case? Well, I kind of already talked about my first one in the Army, but my first SAR case in the Gulf was probably super lame. We did more medevac than anything. And so it was probably some daytime flight out to the shell or some big platform where it's got a huge landing zone, and you land and you pick some dude up and you take him to the hospital. So it's not that exciting. But throughout the next 3 years or so, we really did some pretty amazing things. We had a great time together, and the camaraderie and the skill level that we brought the crews up to. The work we did 24 hours a day, dark nights, deep water Gulf of Mexico. I mean, 200 and plus miles offshore. And we're doing some really, really great stuff. And there's a few, events that we've experienced together during those 3 years.
Yes, there was. Yeah.
Pretty significant.
So. You can talk about anything you want, my friend. Hey, I'll admit and or decline.
All right. So the first one I'll bring up is, and this is for the listeners, right? So if you're in a technical role, or if you're in any type of first responder job or search and rescue job, your equipment checks, your rig checks, your checklists, your procedures, all that stuff is super important. It's really important because the littlest mistake can have a pretty big impact. And I remember we were flying one night. We had gone offshore. What day I think it was, it doesn't really matter. But we had gone and picked up a patient from a platform. And you, Jason, were the rescue swimmer on the aircraft. I don't remember the rest of the crew, but
so I think Lane Abshire was with us. Who was just a couple episodes ago. And then
Miss Lane.
I believe it might have been actually Joe Martin as the hoist operator. So we had a good crew. So
and every crew we had there was good. I can't even begin to talk about it. But we picked up this patient, and in the Augusta 139, the med bed lays the thwart ships, right? So it's kind of left and right. It's not fore and aft like some air evac aircraft. And so we've got this patient on the med bed, and before takeoff checks are completed, and then we take off from the rig and we do our departure, and we're kind of on our acceleration and our climb out, and I hear this loud bang and just a rush of air, and instinctually I kind of knew that one of the sliding doors had come open. And immediately I was like, oh my gosh, this could be really bad, because we're like doing 70 knots right now, and the door is quite substantial on a 139, and if that thing just slid open without anybody kind of riding it back, then we could have just broken it or lost the door. And I was concerned that the door may have gone in the tail rotor. And so immediately I kind of reacted on the flight controls, and I said, oh my gosh, what was that? Do we still have the door on the aircraft? And somebody said, yeah, the door's still attached. So I knew it didn't leave the aircraft. It hadn't damaged, the empennage or the tail rotor. So at least we were still flying. And I said, well, this is not good. And the patient's head is just now looking at ocean and sky. And so I'm like, well, we probably need to land and evaluate this to determine if we can still fly. So we landed, and through that whole conversation, I give you credit, right? Because one of the things I've learned in my career is that if you can't admit your mistakes, or if you can't share them with the crew or the group, you're never going to go anywhere whatsoever. And I'm thinking the whole time, I'm like, oh my gosh, we had a door failure. Like, what happened? Like, did we have an equipment failure? Did we have an aircraft malfunction? And you totally rogered up, and you said, hey, I got up and moved, and my gear caught the door handle, and it opened the door. And from that, I said, dude, you know what? That's not the easiest thing to admit, but you do it. And so now immediately you start figuring out, hey, what can we learn from this? How do we change our checklist? Do we change our best practices? Do we change our let me tell the pilot I'm going to get up. Let me remove my seatbelt, all this kind of stuff. And it really turned into something really good in that regard, because I've flown with people that will not admit their mistakes. And so from that incident, I have tried to always admit my mistake, or, hey, I didn't do something I probably could have done better. And I'll tell my crews that, or my pilots or my employees, that, hey, look, I'm not perfect, and here's how we can learn from it. So that was a pretty good story that ended up well. We didn't damage anything. I mean, we damaged the door a little bit, but it got fixed, but it wasn't catastrophic. But we were able to debrief it. We were able to talk about it, and we were able to learn from it. And I think that was a pretty good experience for everyone involved,
Well,
maybe.
Thanks. So now I'll tell you what, I will tell you from my aspect, and seeing that we're talking about this one in particular, is we had loaded the patient up on the back. And at that time, if you can picture the back of the 139, let's see, I was sitting in the back right seat as the swimmer. The paramedic was sitting in the back left, and the hoist operator is in the forward right side, facing aft in the back of the helicopter. Well, in this in particular patient, I had then moved on to diagonal to the other seat. So now I'm sitting forward, left side, facing aft.
Yeah.
And the reason behind that at the time is that I was helping Lane with the airway and making sure that the patient was secured and helping monitor and IVs and doing that stuff. Well, the handle to the door had been right next to me.
Yeah.
We had done our checks and said, yeah, doors are closed and secured. I had looked down. Yep. I verified it was down and locked. And somewhere in that, I had moved, I had stood up, and I'm helping Lane. I'm reaching over the patient to grab gear, and eventually the handle popped up, and now all of a sudden we're at 70 knots. Door comes open, it slides straight back, and we were like, holy cow. Everybody's okay, and it's it's out that fly the aircraft to number one. Are we still in the air? Yes. Are there anything going wrong? No. Can we land? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Then once we got down, it was like, all right, one of the wheels had popped off the track. But I'm happy to admit that, and I remember rephrase that. I'm not happy to admit it, but I will admit that I made a mistake, and let's learn from it and move on. And I think that's important for everybody across the industry. Man up, lady up, whatever you want to say.
And you don't stop doing your job. You don't just, because you still got a job to do. We still have 2.5 minutes to fly to land the aircraft. And so everyone still did their thing. And I on the surface, it's kind of funny. And you're like, oh, well, but it could have been catastrophic. But still, nevertheless, it was, the point is you learn from it. You can debrief it and you go, hey, I made a mistake. How do we change and make our procedures better? Yeah. And so for anybody listening, those are the kind of things that you can't really work out on the table before you go fly, because those are the unexpected. Yeah. And once they happen, you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea this could possibly happen. Yeah. And so those are the things you learn from. So it's a really great story, and I appreciate you letting me share that.
Oh, heck yeah. I am okay with giving my faults, and like you said, I am human. You are human. We make mistakes. It's not that it's not okay to make the mistakes, but it's not okay to make a mistake. You have to make a mistake to learn.
Yep.
And then you have to make a mistake and then make the correction. If you can't admit that you made a mistake, now there's a different issue there.
Yeah, because then someone's probably going to make that mistake again. And then you'll be kind of sitting in the wings going, oh man, I probably should have mentioned that.
Yeah, right. Oh, that happened again? Well, why didn't you tell somebody the first time? Well, I was scared. I was this. No, eat your humble pie. Yeah. All right. So now from there, after that wonderful incident.
Yeah, that was good. But then, to be honest, the majority of our time together really was, I think, built around camaraderie, teamwork. Yeah. And I honestly think that the core group of people that we had in that program were truly dedicated to excellence. And I'm going to read something later in the show that talks about striving for excellence. And I think I take a lot of pride in the work that we did there. because I do think that we really kind of every day we woke up and said, hey, we need to be excellent. And how do we do that? And we did it together, and we trained well together, and we did a lot of routine operations, but we always tried to do them the best we could.
Yeah.
We did a lot of, hoisting. We did a lot of nighttime operations. We did a lot of flying, a lot of different hospitals. And I think it was really, really a fantastic highlight of my career when we worked together in the Gulf of Mexico, for sure. And the team that we had down there, some of the greatest people that I still, communicate with a lot of them. And it was really quite fantastic, to be honest with you.
We definitely had a very unique group, and just even a unique niche in the world of helicopters and search and rescue where we were at, because it was pretty groundbreaking, of some pioneering. It was some struggles, with the FAA and regulatory things, and just technique and rules and this and, but I think we did it really well, and we did it very safely. Yeah. Oh, totally agree. And this is one of the things that I really enjoyed working with you with, because for me, as a guy in the back of the aircraft, I'm not going to speak for everybody out there, but I probably generalize and say the majority of us in the back don't sit there and start reading regulations that have to do with the guys up front. But I had an opportunity to sit down and work with you as you're digging through with a fine-tooth comb every FAA rule and regulation as far as hoisting, class A, B, C, D, how it was. And to sit there with you, Peter Kelly, Chris Galeen, like all of you guys. And for me, that was an eye-opener. I was like, oh, wow, there's some good information here. And I was able to learn a lot from you guys. And for everybody else out there that's listening, dig into a manual. It's boring. It's all boring can be, but it's amazing what you can learn and what you'll take out of it. I think, go ahead.
No, I think it's a valid point. And once again, I slipped through the cracks. I'm not sure how I got to where I was. I always felt woefully unqualified, but when you're part of the brain trust, there's definitely power in numbers. And so I was never the smartest guy in the room, but when you surround yourself with people who are extremely smart, you can really accomplish quite a bit. And so it really was a team effort. From it's something that I overlooked, someone else is going to be like, hey, listen to what I read last night, or something that they may have missed. I would say, hey, I picked this up the other day on, in my research. And so it's not a one man or one woman show. It's really, you definitely need to surround yourself with a team of people who are dedicated to the success of the operation. And when you can do that, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, totally. One of the things that I remember specifically, like talking to you and Peter Kelly about, and maybe you can touch on this even a little further, but it was, as we were reading all the regulations, we were going back and forth between class A, B, C, and D. Now, class A is, for everybody that doesn't know, it's attached to the aircraft, is non-jettisonable above the landing gear, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like heli-skiing or mountain bikes to the exterior of the aircraft,
right?
Or the old Nash helicopter where the patient was actually strapped outside the aircraft.
Right.
That's a class A external load. Yeah.
Perfect. Right. Well, guess who's a class A load? I am, as a hoist operator. I'm attached to the aircraft, non-jettisonable. I'm above the landing gear. Hey, now all of a sudden you get into class B. That's your gear equipment that gets hoisted down, that's jettisonable, and now below the landing gear. Now we're in a class B load because we're inserting gear and equipment. The other one that got twisted with that, and maybe you can help me out with this, is class B. If you're a trained personnel so you're part of the company or.
Yeah. So that's where the challenge came, is the differentiation between, or the line that was drawn between a class B load and a class D load.
The human
class C, we don't really need to talk about it. Class C.
Well, I do want to talk about class C. I'll tell you, I'll interject real quick here, because as a class C load, you're attached to the ground. You're jettisonable and attached to the ground. Oh, what's that? Oh, that's right, a tagline. You now all of a sudden you have a tagline connect to your gear, your person, your whatnot. You're actually a class C load versus a class B or D. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, but the difference between the class B and the class D is the class D is a live body who is paying for the service. And so they have certain rights and they have certain demands, like they have the right to not die.
Yes.
They have the right for the helicopter to not crash. The Class B, it could be a live body, but it's a employee of the company, or it's an employee of the operation, such as you. In your case, you are a Class B load because you've kind of signed on to the fact that you're part of the operation. If the aircraft crashes, you don't get to sue us.
Right.
But a Class D load is the customer, and the customer says, I kind of want some insurance. I want some assurance of safety. And even if you lose an engine, I want to know that I'm still going to be able to be picked up or set down on the ground. And so that's the biggest difference between Class B human external cargo and Class D human external cargo. And the FAA regulates it very, um, um, very closely, and it can be quite complicated to navigate some of those rules.
Right. Very much so. I remember specifically sending helping watch us draft emails and stuff, or letters that went to the FAA for clarification, which they did get back to us. It might have been a little longer timeline, but they got back to us. It
was definitely, an interesting thing. And man, we learned so much. And then to come to find out that, we don't need to spend too much time on this, but basically at the end of the day, the FAA said, what you do of 12 miles offshore is not really our we can't regulate that. And we said, oh, wait, are you serious? So now we fall under ICAO rules. And so we kind of had this epiphany of, wait, we need to relook the rules we're operating. And they were kind enough to say, here's the deal, and so it changes, right? So ICAO has a little bit different rules in place than the FAA. So man, we learned so much, and I think we exploited the capability of the rules and of the capability of the aircraft and the crew to everyone's advantage.
Right.
And we did it safely, and we did it, to mitigate as much risk as possible. So that was awesome. That was such a powerful 3 years for me, as I learned so much about navigating that kind of stuff and working with some really talented people.
Yeah. Which it's kind of interesting that we talk about rules and regulations, because I'm going to segue into the same thing that Pat Barber and I talked about is, yes, you were our pilot for when we went to the cruise ship, and I'm dropping bombs off to yogurt bombs onto Evan.
That is one of the most memorable events of my aviation career, and I just got tickled to death when I listened to that podcast with Pat. It brought back so many memories, and I was just secretly filling in all the gaps for some of the details, and I'm just reliving that moment or those 2 days, and that was really quite special, because we did some pretty neat stuff there.
Right.
And the work that you guys did, I just hovered the helicopter, and the other guys I flew with, Chris, and we just, to me, our work was a little bit insignificant, but you guys worked, and you're right. You did hundreds and hundreds of hoists, and we just hovered a bunch, and flew in between the ships, and managed fuel and power and time and all that kind of stuff. And that was so special. And the video that you made afterwards, it's one of my favorite things. I play it and I listen to the music, and I kind of reminisce and tell people about them, this is cool. And then even when I left the company, I got a shirt with a picture from CNN on the front of it, and our helicopter hovering cruise ship. And I still have the shadow box today. I keep that. And so those were really special times. And that event really was really cool, because it was unique. That doesn't happen very often. A cruise ship just doesn't get disabled at sea.
Yeah. And now all of a sudden they're in tow to come all the way back. Yeah.
They have to get towed for 9 days back to port. And we're hauling, melons and meat and yogurt, and it was awesome.
It was so fun. I was so thankful that we were able to be there for that one.
I wish you could have seen the cruise ship from the air, because we got to see it, and Eben got to see it. You were on the Lana Rose.
Right. The supply
was
boat.
was the name of your supply boat. You were there the whole time, but from the air, the cruise ship, like all the passengers were spelling out things on the deck in their sheets, their bed sheets. They were spelling out help, and they were waving to us. And sure, we're dropping yogurt on the deck and all kind of stuff. But it was
Uh,
it was awesome. Some great photos from
yeah.
that those 2 days. So
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, a lot of fun. And it was one of the other things that was really nice about that case. I don't know if Pat and I talked about it much, but the coordination between us and the Coast Guard. So the Coast Guard helicopter, the Black Hawk came out, or I'm sorry, the Jayhawk, they came out of Mobile, Alabama, and
yep.
they had a couple qualified crews, and they were like hoisting guys down to our boat to bring out. They had a generator they were going to get on the cruise ship, and so they're going to short haul that out. And
Yeah, because the ship had no power, they had no
nope.
engine. Like, it was bizarre. It was
Yeah,
such a bizarre
yeah, very weird.
situation. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember those guys coming down, which was something that was interesting between us and them, because go back to checklists and whatnot. As aviators, we want our nose into the wind and the boat just off 10 degrees to the right or 15 degrees to the right. And it just so happened the supply vessel, when we put that degree based on the winds, the vessel it was weird that it was a terrible ride. And it made it actually hoisting harder based on the waves and the direction of the wind. So the Coast Guard came in, and again, following their checklist, following the standard, I need you to put your nose in the vessel to this direction, and we're going to go in. And then you came out and be like, man, you guys are getting beat the shit down there. Hey, you want to turn your boat this degree? And they were like, oh, that would be great. And it was like, oh, that was so much easier.
Yeah.
So
it was
kind of funny.
We got some great helmet cam footage from that one, and yeah, that was a great time, man. I I like reminiscing about that particular operation. That was great.
I think one of my favorite parts of that whole thing was when we were done. Again, talking about rules and regulations, fall back to that real quick, is we hit that 12 miles off the coast of the US, and all of Coast Guard came out, Border Patrol, and all these guys, and they basically surround the cruise ship, and they were like, yeah, all right.
And the news helicopters too started coming out.
Yeah. But then they were like, okay, break off. You guys are done. We are no longer in need of your assistance. And we're like, all right, cool. Peace out. Well, on the way out, I had all of our bags and equipment on deck with me. Well, it just so happened I came up with a load of melons and
dude,
good sandwich meat. Thank you, cruise ship.
We still had some stuff on the aircraft, so we ate some really good deli meat for the next few days. And then when we picked up Eben off the ship, he brought some beach towels up with him, like pool towels. So, dude, I still have my cruise ship towel. I still use it. Like, I take it with me in my road bag. Like, if I'm going on the road, I'll take it with me. And I still have that towel. It's like a one that the cruise ship would offer you at the pool. And so I keep that. I use that still to this day, man.
You know what? We earned it that day. We earned a towel. I'm okay with that.
I agree.
Oh my gosh, dude, that was so fun, man.
Yeah,
we had a good time. So
absolutely.
And we had a lot of other cases that we had in the Gulf of Mexico, and I don't want to take away from all the other ones that we did, whether it's hoisting, landing. We had such a good crew mentality in the back of the aircraft, and I know you want to touch on some of that, so I'll kind of segue and lead into that. And that is with all our crew resource management that we harp on everybody else, and it doesn't get talked about enough, and at the same time it gets talked about so much that people are like, okay, we've heard it 1,000 times. Yeah, but crew resource management, you have to have a good crew. You have to be able to talk to your pilot. Your pilot has to be able to talk to your crew. So
absolutely. And it's kind of become a religion of mine, if you would, in this business. You can't value it or devalue it. You can't understate it. You can't ignore it. It really is. And we flew with a crew of 5 people. And if one single person on that crew was not in sync or didn't understand what was going on or wasn't in agreement, like it's not a safe place to be. You have to have everyone on board when it comes to crew resource management. And I am a crew resource management instructor. I've been to specialized training for it. I preach it everywhere I go. I apply it with my crews to this day. And you're absolutely right. If it's one of the most important ingredients to a successful operation.
Mm-hmm.
And the human factor really is the key. Like, helicopters are very reliable now. The equipment is very reliable. We have procedures in place that are very proven, and when they're safe, and all this stuff is we rarely have an accident that's attributed to mechanical failure or something like that, right? All the accident, or 85% of the accidents today, are attributed to the human factor. And if you don't respect that, and you don't train for it, and you don't practice the prevention of an accident due to humans, then you're kind of destined to experience one. And we do all this flight training. Oh, let me do an auto rotation in case my engine fails. Let me do a run on landing in case my tail rotor fails. And we do all this training in case something mechanically goes wrong on the aircraft.
Yep.
But how much training does your organization really put into, well, what do we do when one of the humans goes wrong?
Yeah.
Or what do we do when someone makes a mistake? Or what do we do when someone's tired? Or what do we do when someone forgets a checklist item? Or what do we do when someone, messes up on an instrument approach? And I think that it's so important that because of the human factor that causes so many of the accidents today, that you really need to, or everyone needs to kind of take an approach to, like, hey, how do we prevent this, and how do we change our training program to incorporate the human failure, just like we incorporate the engine failure or the tail rotor failure or the hoist failure. Like, we do all that training, but really, how much time do we spend on, hey, let's practice a human failure? Let's practice some of that. And so I think we did a pretty good job of that.
Yes.
And I also think that we experienced some of the failures of that. Like, I think that there were some crew members that didn't embrace that concept, and it really showed.
Yes.
And it could have been catastrophic. Fortunately, it wasn't. But I think there were some incidents where you realize, like, not everyone's really on board with this idea of crew resource management.
Yeah.
And fortunately, we kind of, moved those people around, and we kind of handled that, hopefully, at a professional level. But I think the cost of human failure is so high that you really have to approach it with a lot of respect. So that's super important to me. I'm contemplating, starting my own podcast that's CRM centric. And
I like it.
Things. So,
Can I be a guest?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm kind of slowly putting that together. I've been kind of working on that for a year, but lots of things happened over the past year that I've kind of put that on hold. But I think it's so important. I've been doing a lot of reading on CRM. I do a lot of teaching on CRM. And I think that I don't think it's emphasized enough in these crew type operations. Yeah. And so some of the organizations that do embrace it, like you and what you do, and the companies that you've worked for, like your sponsor SR3, I think some of those organizations really do get it, and they get it right. And so I think that's super important in this type of business.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm on board with you. I preach it.
I literally, like, my briefing every day at work, like when I'm pulling a shift at work, it's me, a paramedic, and a nurse, and that's our crew on our aircraft, and we're flying single pilot IFR. And so when I'm doing my crew briefing in the morning or whenever we do shift change, I spend a lot of time on CRM, and I tell them things like, we're all in this together. There's no such thing as your side of the aircraft is getting ready to crash. Like that doesn't exist, you know? And
What a
I
good
tell them,
point that is. I might steal that from you.
yeah. And I tell them, I was like, look, if it's important enough to think about, it's probably important enough to say.
Yeah.
And if you two are in the back of the aircraft mouthing to each other, what are we doing? You should probably ask the pilot, what are we doing? Like, bring this up in conversation. If the aircraft is heading in a direction that you don't know, then you
Yeah.
should probably say something.
Yeah.
If you're concerned about the fact that you can't see the ground anymore, you should say something.
Yeah.
If you're concerned about the fact that your pilot hasn't spoken in 7 minutes, you should probably say something. And I'm a very vocal person in the aircraft. I talk a lot and I say a lot of things. And sometimes people get annoyed with it. I'm like, but you know what? You're never going to wonder what's going through my mind because
Right.
I'm going to make it come out my mouth. And we talk a lot about it. I'm like, this is super important. Like we're all in this together, and any decision that we're going to make in the aircraft needs to be made, as a crew, and everyone gets a vote and some input. And when those voices and opinions are valued and respected, then everyone's empowered. And if you can get your crew to feel empowered, then you've got a pretty powerful thing.
Yep. I'll throw one more thing in there to piggyback off that is even if you disagree with something. So let's say we have a crew of 5 people and I don't agree with what the 4 have decided. Like, hey, we think this is the best. I'm like, I don't think that. My job at that moment in time is to embrace what the crew has decided that is the safest practice, and we work together to make it happen.
Yeah.
If there is somebody that says, absolutely not, I'm not going flying, then we all don't go flying.
And I've done that.
Yeah. So
because at the end of the day, I'd rather be sitting on the ground wishing I was up there than being up there wishing I was on the ground.
Right.
And so if we lost a revenue flight or we lost an opportunity to go fly because someone wasn't comfortable, I would rather turn that into a training opportunity or a discussion to say, you know what, and even if we educate the entire crew and go, here's why we could have gone flying tonight. And then the crew member or whoever says, oh, wow, I didn't realize that. And then the next night they are on board and they go fly. Yeah. But at the end of the day, they might expose something that you're like, oh my gosh, I totally missed that. Wow. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. And I'm glad we didn't go fly. Right. And it's just, we can't do this alone, man. I mean, yeah, sure. There's a lot of like jet jocks out there that are flying all by themselves, but I think there's probably flights where they wish they had someone to talk to.
Yeah. Right.
Yep.
I'll bring up one more example of good and bad CRM in general. And one of them is I was not on this flight, so I just got debriefed. So forgive me, you'll have to, kind of put pieces together. But, guys went out, they went hoist training. And at one point or another, the medic had given an abort signal of a slashing motion across his throat. That was our abort hand signal at the time. Well, he had never announced it over ICS. Nobody else knew that there was an abort signal given other than the hoist operator. Well, the hoist operator also did not mention it over ICS and continued to hoist because the other guy on the hoist was okay. And he was like, oh no, so just that guy wants to be done. No. What the communication was when they got back to debrief was, hey, I was uncomfortable with everything going on. I gave you an abort signal and you continued on. Well, sir, when you give an abort signal or you want to change something in the middle of the flight, announce it so everybody has input and then talk about it amongst the crew. Put the aircraft into a safe position, whether that's back into a rest position, a hover away from all obstacles, or in a pattern, but have an opportunity to talk amongst each other and then come to a crew decision. It's so important.
It really is. And I totally agree. And there is a difference between U.S. military special operations going after bin Laden or doing a hostage rescue, and a commercial operation where you're flying for hire or you're even in a search and rescue event. And so in the military operation, there may not be time for question. You just go and you do, right? And then there's casualties of war, right? So that's different. But in this particular case, there is no reason if someone on the crew or on the ground or some safety or some first responder on the radio says abort or go around or I don't like this or stop, like there's no reason to not stop, even if everyone else thinks it's perfectly safe to go, right? And so I'm totally on board with that. And if the first time you don't respect that command, you've totally lost all faith in your crew and the people on the ground. So even if I think I'm making the most beautiful approach in the world and there's no dust and there's no hazards and I'm landing in a 100-acre football field with sod and it's perfectly level in the middle of the daytime and birds are tweeting and music's playing in my ear and someone says, go around. If I continue my approach, I have just ruined a lot of things that have taken a long time to build.
Right.
So I go around and in the downwind or in my traffic pattern, I say, hey, what did you see that I didn't see? Because it all looked perfect to me. And they'll say, oh, well, I caught my gear on the door handle and I thought the door was going to come. Or they say, I wasn't comfortable. I wasn't comfortable with that approach. And there's no reason not to honor that interjection. And I think it's super important. And if you go into this business not being able to swallow that pill or accept that, then you're kind of in the wrong business. And so in your example, or in the example you brought up, if everyone's at the hover and everyone's working, and then someone, I don't care who it is, I don't care if it's the rescue swimmer, if it's the specialist, or if it's guy on the platform, if someone gives an abort signal, then you're right, everything stops. You just stop and you put, like you said, put the aircraft in a safe position, whether that's a stabilized hover, or a rest position, or you've gone around and you're in a traffic pattern or in an overhead orbit, and you talk about it and you figure out what went wrong. And if someone goes, oh, my mistake, nothing was wrong, let's try it again. So what? You go try it again, and you pat that person on the back for not being afraid to call an abort. And if you don't have that culture, and if you don't have that that culture in your organization, then you're not doing something right. Everyone in your company, everyone in your organization should be comfortable doing that. And you should train that way. Sometimes when I was training students for the Army, they would be on a really good approach. They'd be going just fine. And I would just call go around to see what they would do, to see how they would react to it. And sometimes they would be like, what? I'm going to continue to land. And I'd say, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why someone called abort or called a go around. You should probably react to it. And you should then talk about why they called that, because it could be something. You're not perfect. There's a reason. This is a crew served weapon, and so it's really, really super important. That's a really good example.
Super, super important. I look forward to listening to your podcast next. All right. So
we'll see.
Crew resource management. Can't emphasize it enough. Everybody out there, stay with the crew resource management. Don't be afraid to speak up, and at the same time, don't be afraid to listen.
I mean, there is a pilot in command on board the helicopter or airplane or whatever crew weapon or crew piece of equipment you're operating. But at the end of the day, everyone gets a vote. Everyone gets an input, and everyone's a critical member to that decision-making team.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Man, thanks for touching on all that. That's great advice. All right, so I'm gonna move on a little bit, because in this, you and I have kind of chatted offline a little bit, but you would like to bring up a little something for everybody out there and all the first responders. So, my friend, the floor is yours.
Okay, I appreciate that, Jason. And I love your podcast, and I love the focus that it has, and I really consider myself a part of that community. I've worked with some really amazing people, but as my career's gone on, I've been exposed to more than just search and rescue. From this perspective, from the helicopter perspective, or from the military's perspective, I've kind of been exposed more to first responders in general, and anybody that is out there standing watch or serving for a community, whether it's as a volunteer firefighter or a volunteer EMT or a paramedic or an air ambulance crew member or Coast Guard search and rescue, whatever the case may be. Anybody that's standing watch to go help somebody else in need is kind of lumped into the same boat.
Agreed.
In this case, you have found a way to do something that's bigger than yourself and contribute to society, or to provide a need that somebody else may have. Hopefully not, but when someone else is in need, you have found a way to answer that call. And hundreds of thousands of people do that on a regular basis across the United States. And this hits particularly close to home for several reasons. My family and I moved to Whidbey Island, Washington, about a year ago. And I was good friends with a buddy of mine who lived on the island as well. He's a helicopter pilot, but he's also a firefighter. And he said, "Hey, you and your wife should join the volunteer fire department here in our community." And I said, "Why would we want to do that? I don't have any interest in being a firefighter." And he said, "Well, the community is served by volunteers, and it could be you coming to my house, and it could be me coming to your house when the need arises." And I was like, okay, well, fair enough. That sounds pretty cool. I like you. And so if your house was on fire, yeah, I would respond. So that's cool. And if my house was on fire, that'd be great if you responded. So, okay, so let me look into that.
Do I owe you money? That's all. I got to ask that question. Do I owe you money? Because if I do, my friend.
And so my wife immediately enrolled in the EMT Academy and became an EMT volunteer for our local fire department.
Very nice.
And I said, all right, sure, I'll do fire. It'll help keep me young. Maybe it'll keep me in shape. It's something to do, right? It's totally out of my league. I have no idea about firefighting. I don't know what I'm doing. So I enrolled in the fire academy. But at the same time, we were expecting a child, and we were planning a home birth, and everything was great. It was all healthy. Everything, our pregnancy was going great. And so we were going to have our child at home. And he was due in February, and we had a midwife and a midwife's assistant. And so it was great. Labor started, everything was wonderful. And when he was born, he wasn't breathing. And it was really a surreal moment. And, I'm asking him, like, why isn't he crying? Like, what's going on? Why is the midwife and her assistant starting CPR on my baby? Why is he that color? Why is there no noise? Like, this is odd. This is just totally taking me out of my element. And the midwife asked me to call 911. And in that moment, I'm like, what is going on? Why am I calling 911 for the birth of my child? And not to get emotional or really deep into it, I called 911. And I'm speaking to the dispatcher, and I'm telling the dispatcher that my wife just had a child, and it's not breathing, and the midwife is started CPR. And the dispatcher says, "Okay, hold on the line for a second." And I knew what she was doing. I used to be a 911 dispatcher, and the dispatcher was toning out the people that were going to come to our house. And she came back on the line and said, "Okay, so help is on the way. You can hang up with me as soon as the first responder gets there." And so a sheriff's deputy pulled up probably within 30 seconds of the phone call, and he came in the front door, and I hung up with the dispatcher. And so the deputy said, "Hi, we're here." As soon as he rolled up, we had a fire engine roll up. We had 2 ambulances roll up. We had medical response vehicles roll up. We had more than a dozen people walk in our front door within about 2 minutes of me calling 911. And about 10 of those people we knew personally, because we were volunteers with the department. And they took over our house. They took over the care of my wife. They took over the care of our child, who was now 3 minutes old, 4 minutes old. And it changed our lives forever. They revived our son. They intubated him. They got him breathing again. They were breathing for him, but they got his heartbeat back up. They used an AED. I'd never seen an AED so small. I didn't know they made one for a newborn. But I'm watching this happen in my kitchen, and it was really surreal. My wife was being cared for by some other paramedics and EMTs, and so she was being taken care of. And I remember them saying, "We've got a heartbeat again, and we're going to continue breathing and make sure the helicopter is on the way." And that perked my ears up, because that's my life, right? I said, "Oh, helicopter, wait a minute. This is my helicopter. This is the company that I work for. And the pilot flying this helicopter probably works for me."
Wow.
And so we loaded up into an ambulance, and we drove to the nearest landing zone, and the helicopter landed. And I met the pilot and the nurse and the paramedic that I have worked with for the past year and a half. And they recognized me, and they realized, oh my gosh, we're taking Gene's child on the helicopter. And so, I'm kind of proud that, my son had a helicopter ride within the first few minutes of his life. And I got to ride along with him. But we went to the trauma center, and we were met by a neo-peds team that specialized in that kind of emergency. And we were treated, and then we were taken to Seattle Children's Hospital by a specialized transport. And we got to spend some time with our son, from what would have been a complete tragedy to what was turned into a week of life. And our son ended up passing away a week after he was born, but we did what we could to find the good in all of that. And most of the good was the first responders that helped rescue our child, if you want to put it in those terms.
Yeah.
We would have never gotten a week with him had it not been for people who were standing watch, who were on duty, who may not have heard a SAR alarm, but they heard a pager go off. They heard tones go out. They said, "Hey, this address needs help, and here's what they need." And they did so without due regard for their own comfort or their own safety. And they came in our front door, and they took care of business. And I was in total awe that day by their performance and their professionalism, their knowledge, and their ability to keep someone alive, not just someone, but an infant, a newborn, a human that was less than 10 minutes old, alive, with such skill and aptitude that I was completely humbled by that. And that changed our lives forever. And so it changed our opinion of, or not our opinion, I mean, we always think highly of first responders, but it changed our perspective for sure. And it kind of solidified the fact that what we're doing and what we do and what you do and what people in this community do for others is not to ever be devalued or seen as insignificant, because you may go a whole career without ever, "Oh, I've never saved a life," or "I've never done anything, so I don't have a fancy SAR case," or "I don't have a fancy a mission, I don't have a lot of award, blah, blah, blah." But you may have that one call, that one tone, that one SAR alarm that changes somebody's life forever. And it really changed ours. And now we are 100% dedicated to this work and this lifestyle and the support of this family that we have in the emergency response community, in the first responders group in general, that when the tones go out, it may suck, it may not be fun, but you're probably going to go help someone that's probably having the worst day of their life.
Right.
And if you can provide some comfort, if you can provide some help, some assistance that gives them just another minute of life, that's important to them, and it was important to us. And I think that that is notable and worthy of mention, that anybody listening to this podcast should, um, not put on a scale like, oh, I'm not a rescue swimmer. I've never saved someone, plucked someone from the Bering Sea, or I've never successfully done CPR and saved someone's life. But regardless of the work you do as a first responder, you are a rescuer, and you are you answer that call when someone needs help. And I think that that's so incredibly important, that doing something bigger than yourself really is kind of what makes this lifestyle and this career so important and so valuable. And I think that's just worthy of discussing and mentioning and talking about.
Wow.
And the last thing I'm going to mention is we had a memorial for our son at our home, and we invited everyone who, all of our family and friends were there, and all of our first responder family and our fire department and EMS family came to the memorial. And I had about the time our son was born, I had just finished reading a book about John Boyd. And do you know who John Boyd is?
I do not know.
I didn't either, but someone introduced me to him. He was an Air Force fighter pilot who kind of changed the way the Air Force fought wars, basically. He changed the Air Force, and he did so kind of controversially. He wasn't really liked by his superiors because he was quite abrasive. And he spoke his opinion, and he said, I think what you guys are doing is messed up, and here's how to do it the right way. And he got into a lot of trouble because of it. But he's kind of famous for many things. But one of the things he's famous for is his mentorship to younger Air Force officers, right? When he worked at the Pentagon, he had a guy come work for him, and he basically pulled him aside, and he was kind of gruff and rough, and he called him Tiger, and he said, hey, Tiger, let me tell you something. You're at some point in your career, you're going to come to a fork in the road, and that fork is going to be two directions that you can go. You can choose to be somebody, or you can choose to do something. He said, if you choose to be someone, you're going to get promoted, you're going to get great assignments, you're going to have a lot of fame and fortune. He goes, but you're going to have to sacrifice some values, and you're probably going to lose some friends along the way, but you'll be somebody important. He said, or you can choose to do something, right? He said, you can go that direction, and you can do something. If you do something, you will not be popular. You'll probably not be liked by some of your superiors. You probably won't get the fancy assignments, and you may not get promoted. He said, but you'll be true to yourself. You'll be true to your values, and you'll do something that changes the course of history, the course of your organization for the better. You'll change someone's life. He said, so to be someone or to do something, you're going to have to choose at some point in your career. And that struck home with me really, really like hard.
Yeah.
And I realized that there's been times in my career where I've like, I want to be someone. I want to get promoted. I want to be like, fancy and whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, it's really important that you choose to do something. And so at our memorial for our son, we put that challenge out there to all our first responders. And I said, first of all, you've already chosen to do something by becoming a first responder. And our son, when he died, he donated his organs to research and to other infants that needed organs. And so in his own way, he chose to do something. I mean, we chose it for him, but he did something, right, to change the world, to change people, to change us. And we had a bunch of stickers made. His name was Daniel, and we had a bunch of stickers made that said, "What would Danny do?" And it's his middle name was Atlas, so it's a picture of Atlas kind of holding up the globe on his shoulders, and the weight of the world bearing down on him. And we kind of find that to be quite apropos of our position today. What are you going to do today? What are you going to do tomorrow that changes the world? How are you going to make a difference for someone? And in this light, we have fully embraced the first responder call, the jobs that people that are standing watch and on the wall do on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And we choose to do something. And so for anybody that's listening, you got a choice. You have you can go be someone, or you can do something. And the people that you surround yourself with, and Jason yourself, and the people you've had on this podcast, and they've chosen to do something, right? And it's not for personal fame or fortune. It's so that others have some better quality of life, whether it's so that others may live, so that others may walk again, so that others may breathe tomorrow, so that others may have a house that didn't completely burn down. That's the do that you have a choice to make. And for us, it has really changed our life. We miss our son. We wish he was alive, but we know that the people that were involved that day did something. And what they did was they put our son in good hands that allowed us to spend a week with him. Otherwise, he would have never made it from the first minute of his birth. Wow. And so I think that's super important. I love your podcast. I love the concept of it. I love the guests that you've had on. And from a big perspective, it really can speak to just our appreciation for any first responder that works on the front line, that works in emergency services, that works in military special operations, military search and rescue, Coast Guard search and rescue, ambulance, air ambulance, EMS, firefighting, paramedics, whatever you want to call it. That is really kind of a special calling in life. And for those people out there that are doing that, we thank you from the bottom of our heart. And Jason, I appreciate you and what you're promoting here.
Thank you.
And the opportunity to share a little bit of our story with you, and an opportunity to once again slip through the cracks and be on your podcast.
There's no slipping through the crack here, my friend. This is like a full-on charge into your house and be like, hey, let's do this. So
it's really it's a special experience, buddy, and I consider you an extremely close friend, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and the conversation. And I look forward to the day that we cross paths again and get a chat and share a hug and a drink.
Absolutely.
So that's really about it. Whatever, if you got any other questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
No, I don't. I'll tell you, thank you for sharing those stories, especially to go down that memory lane and to be able to open up to share it with so many that are listening. So thank you. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And thank you for the announcer talking about all the EMS, everybody out there that's doing this job, from the guy that's driving the ambulance to the guy that's in the air and everybody in between. So there's a lot.
Yeah, I was just humbled and like in awe of their ability, capability, their tenacity. It just blows me away. Even when we worked together from the front of the aircraft, I found my job to be easy. But when I turned around and looked over my shoulder, I'm like, holy crap, I could never do that job that you guys are doing in the back. So it's, I'm in complete, you have my complete respect. So.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Hey, you have mine as well. I mean, I've learned a ton from you. So it goes both ways for sure. So
thanks, buddy.
You. But man, Gene, thank you so much for coming on and sharing this with us. It's
Of course.
Such a pleasure to talk to you. Such a pleasure to have you on.
Of course.
Let me know whenever you get another one. Give me a call. We'll get you on again. All right.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Awesome.
For sure. It's been awesome. I'm so glad we finally got together.
Me too. Me too. I look forward to our drink and maybe a stogie and maybe a night out. And this time you'll be Michael Phelps' sparring partner.
Oh, you want to hear the story about the mustache?
I absolutely do.
So, okay, real quick, and then I'll be done. Normally, I like to wear a full beard, right? And I've had some pretty epic beards, like just nice, really. Just as soon as I got out of the military, I stopped shaving. But when I started volunteering for the fire department, they introduced me to the SCBA, right, and the mask that goes with the SCBA. And they said, "Oh, you have to create a good seal, and you can't get a good seal with that beard." And I was like, "What?" And they said, "Yeah, you're gonna have to shave that off." So I shaved my beard for Fire Academy, and sure enough, you get a good seal of the face mask when you got nice, clean skin. And finished Fire Academy, and that was cool. And so I kind of let it start growing again. But then I started standing some duty, and we actually went and fought a fire a few weeks ago. And one of the guys on the fire was like, "Oh, I'm looking a little scruffy there. How does your mask seal up?" And I was like, "Oh, it seals just fine." But then later I realized, I'm like, yeah, the longer this beard hair gets, it's not going to seal so well. So, I kind of owe it to myself and my family and everyone else to have a good seal on my face mask if I'm breathing on air. And so we had a drill, a fire department drill the other night, and everyone was going to be there. The chiefs were going to be there. And I was like, I should probably shave, it's probably the right thing to do because I don't want to be called out. So I started shaving. And I was like, you know what? Life's too short. Let me see if I can get one of those good firefighter mustaches, right? Because let me see how much facial hair I can have and still get a good seal, with my mask. So I'm in the bathroom, I'm kind of shaving it up, right? And I'm like, okay, I think this is good. And so I come out of the bathroom. Of course, my wife's like, "Oh, that's terrible. Don't do that ever again." And my daughter was like, "Who are you? Like, what's going on?" And of course, you get all the jokes and everyone's commenting on it, but it's still just something fun to do. So I can still put on a good, SCBA face mask, and it still works, but I still have a little bit of.
It's beautiful. Nice little handlebar.
I don't know how long I'm gonna keep it, but anyway, it was fun, right? It's not. I'm not trying to win any beauty contests, that's for sure.
You might. You know what? Just put your name in the hat. See what happens.
If you look at my Facebook, I actually, me and Susie have a really good picture on there. We took a photo the other night at drill, and so it's like I'm in like our bunker gear. She's in her bunker gear, and I've got the full-on firefighter mustache going on. So
I love it.
Nice. Yeah. So, anyway, that's it, buddy.
Dude, I love it, man. Gene, thank you so much for coming on, dude. I can't thank you enough. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely, Jason. It's been great, man. Thank you for having me.
Anytime. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are out of here. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Real ResQ podcast. Please take a minute and, like my daughters like to tell me, like and subscribe. Oh yeah. I'm pulling chocks and taking off. But before I go, if anyone out there has a rescue story that they would be willing to share, I would be humbled and honored to have you as a guest. Or if you have any questions about any of the rescues or anything else that we talk about here on this podcast, send me an email, therealresq@gmail.com. That's TheRealResQ@gmail.com. You can also check us out on our Facebook and Instagram page at The Real ResQ. That's at TheRealResQ. I also want to give a special thank you to all of you staying on the watch today. Always remember that when that SAR alarm goes off, those in distress are praying for a miracle. They are going to get you. Until next time, fly safe and swim hard.